It's strange how silence can feel louder in a room full of people. How distant laughter can throb in your chest like thunder. How saying a simple hi can feel like stepping barefoot on broken glass. If you've ever stood among people with your heart racing, wondering if they can hear your thoughts, then you already understand what social anxiety feels like. It's not really a fear of people. It's the fear of being seen and misunderstood at the same time. Social anxiety isn't just shyness or introversion. It's not just preferring solitude or avoiding small talk. It's a psychological experience rooted deep in the nervous system, a constant tug-of-war between wanting connection and fearing judgment. The paradox is painful. You crave belonging, yet the thought of being noticed makes your body tighten, like it's bracing for danger. You want to speak, but your voice hides beneath your ribs. Psychologists describe it as an intense fear of negative evaluation, the mind constantly scanning for signs of rejection. The brain starts interpreting harmless social cues as threats, a glance, a pause, a different tone, and suddenly your thoughts spiral. Did I say something wrong? Do I seem strange? Maybe I should have stayed quiet. That's the silent dialogue of someone with social anxiety, a constant, invisible conversation that never stops. What's happening beneath the surface is both fascinating and heartbreaking. Research shows that the amygdala, the brain's fear center, becomes overactive in people with social anxiety. This means their brain sends danger signals even in safe situations. A normal interaction can feel like standing under a spotlight. Every gesture feels exaggerated, every word over-amplified, and it's not your fault. It's your biology trying to shield you from rejection, because to the brain, rejection feels like danger. Yet here is what most people don't realize. Social anxiety isn't always visible. It doesn't always look like shaking hands or trembling words. Sometimes it looks like a perfect smile, practiced answers, and nodding along while your mind begs to leave. It looks like canceling plans you were excited about. It looks like replaying conversations long after they're done. It's the quiet exhaustion of pretending to be okay every day. And under all of it lies a powerful sensitivity. People with social anxiety often notice details others don't. Changes in tone, tiny facial expressions, emotional shifts in the room, they catch them all. Their emotional radar is almost too sharp. They read between lines, feel beneath words, and carry emotions that aren't theirs. That's not weakness. That's awareness turned inward until it hurts. The roots of social anxiety are complex. Sometimes it's genetic. Studies show it can run in families tied to temperament and brain chemistry. Sometimes it's learned. Growing up where you were judged, criticized, or unsafe to express yourself can train the brain to link people with pain. For some, it comes from repeated humiliation or failure. For others, it's subtle. Years of being told, just be confident, until you begin believing something is wrong with you for struggling. As these experiences pile up, something profound happens. Psychologists call it self-focused attention. Your awareness turns inward. You stop living in the world and start watching yourself live in it. You become hyper-aware of how you look, speak, move. Every gesture feels examined. Every silence feels like proof you've said too much, or not enough. It's not vanity. It's survival. At its core, social anxiety is the fear of exposure. Not physical exposure, emotional exposure. It's the fear that if people saw the real you, they wouldn't accept it. That's why advice like, be confident or stop caring what people think never helps. Because people with social anxiety already know nobody is thinking about them that much. But logic doesn't calm the nervous system. When your body thinks it's in danger, reason doesn't matter. So what do you do when your body becomes a battlefield? When your voice trembles in moments that should feel normal? When your silence is mistaken for arrogance? When being normal feels like survival? Here's something surprising. Social anxiety isn't always a flaw. Sometimes it's empathy in overdrive. Your brain has learned to care too deeply about others' feelings, to predict reactions before they happen. You've been taught not to upset anyone, so you absorb discomfort instead of causing it, And in doing so, you lose your own peace. But there is beauty in this too, because the same sensitivity that makes crowds overwhelming can make connection meaningful. You notice emotions others pass by. You understand what people feel before they speak. You experience the world deeply, intimately. And while that depth can hurt, it's also the reason your compassion is real. Still, it's difficult, so difficult, to live in a mind that never rests. To mentally practice each discussion beforehand and analyze every interaction afterward. To sense that you exist inside the resonance of your own awareness. The harsh paradox is this: the harder you attempt to manage it, the more intense it becomes. As soon as you attempt to push down anxiety, your mind registers that effort as an increased threat. This traps you in a cycle, fearing the very feeling of fear. An established psychological concept explains this: the paradox of control. It states that the more forcefully you try to govern an inner emotion, the more ungovernable it gets. This is the reason instructing yourself to relax seldom succeeds. The answer lies not in suppression, but in comprehension. It's about developing the ability to acknowledge the feelings without acting on them. It's about observing your quickening pulse, your damp hands, your cascading thoughts, and responding, "This is my system defending me, not failing me." Professionals frequently employ methods such as exposure therapy or CBT to address social anxiety. These approaches don't eliminate the fear. They recondition the brain to perceive it differently. With incremental exposure, you learn that social settings are not inherently dangerous, that your value is not contingent upon how you perform, that a lack of sound isn't disapproval and making a mistake isn't defeat. The goal is not to be devoid of fear. It's about understanding that fear need not shape who you are. The profound thing about social anxiety is its reflection of a core human longing, the need for inclusion. Each anxious pulse, every uncomfortable pause, each meticulously analyzed phrase, they all stem from a single fact: your desire for connection. Yet connection is paradoxically what social anxiety complicates the most. This is why recovering from it is more than just a mental process. It's spiritual, in a sense. To move past it, you must allow yourself to be visible, completely, flaws and all, unapologetically. You must accept the risk of misinterpretation to achieve genuine understanding. You realize social anxiety isn't merely an ailment of fear. It's an ailment of how you see yourself. At some point, the reflection between your true self and your perception of others' views grew warped. You started to accept that your worth is determined by validation, that your very presence requires constant defense, that you should never burden anyone by just existing. Consequently, you make yourself smaller. You talk quietly. You blend into the periphery. Then, one day, you observe your surroundings and recognize you've constructed an existence too constricting for your spirit. Yet, this is the extraordinary part. Every individual experiencing social anxiety reaches a point. Perhaps it's subtle, perhaps it's abrupt, when concealment becomes exhausting. When they understand the price of invisibility far exceeds the dread of judgment. That is the instant transformation starts. It doesn't happen by coercion. It doesn't happen by faking confidence. It happens through tender self-kindness. The reality is, the most self-assured individuals aren't without fear. They simply ceased warring against it. They discovered how to bear it with dignity, to allow their anxiety to be present without letting it dictate. And if you are a person who contends with this, understand that your anxiety doesn't mean you're defective. It means you're perceptive. It confirms your humanity. And that perception, as agonizing as it is, can evolve into your best instructor. Because as you start to comprehend your mind, you also start to take it back. You begin to see the world isn't as severe as your internal narrative implies, that others are not scrutinizing you to the degree you imagine, that quiet is not condemnation. At times, it's just tranquility. And the little shaking voice you conceal could be the very one another person urgently needs. There is a silent heroism in navigating life with social anxiety. For although it may not appear theatrical, it requires a constant display of bravery. Each instance you enter a space. Each instance you talk, despite the tension in your throat. Each instance you remain engaged even as your heart races. That is courage in its most unadulterated state. Society applauds overt self-assurance, but it overlooks that quiet perseverance is its own form of power. You see, those with social anxiety are frequently among the most reflective individuals. They dedicate vast amounts of time to observation, monitoring how individuals behave, how they communicate, how feelings change like the climate. This fosters a subdued, near-philosophical profundity. Their grasp of human conduct comes not from texts, but from direct experience, because they've dissected every minute element of social exchange, not from inquisitiveness, but from a need to survive. And by doing this, they've acquired an insight into people that most lack. Yet, this very perception can turn into an enclosure. When you're perpetually assessing the environment, you cease to experience the environment. You evolve into an analyst of feelings, not an active partaker. You invest so much energy in perception management that you disconnect from genuineness. This is why recovering from social anxiety is more than decreasing fear. It's about finding your authentic self under the strata of self-defense. Picture this: a youth in a park, giggling, oblivious to onlookers. That is how liberty felt before anxiety became familiar. Social anxiety is, in many respects, the recollection of emotional peril. It's your brain insisting, never repeat that. But recovery starts when you recognize you are not that youth who had to stay hidden. You are secure today, and your voice has a right to be heard without justification. A truly freeing insight is that social anxiety isn't the same as being anti-social. Actually, the majority who contend with it are profoundly social. They simply bear an overabundance of empathy. They ponder too much on the consequences of their statements. They visualize all conceivable responses, all potential unease they might generate. It isn't a lack of desire for connection. It's a desire to connect flawlessly. And flawlessness destroys connection. Because individuals don't form bonds over perfection. They connect through sincerity, exposure, and mutual imperfection. As you begin to accept that reality, a change occurs. You cease attempting to wow others and begin trying to understand them. You cease practicing your words and start to truly hear. And oddly, the less you act, the more others confide in you. Because genuine presence, subdued, flawed, raw, is compelling. Social anxiety frequently conditions people to self-scrutinize excessively. But self-awareness in equilibrium is a boon. It permits you to ponder, to connect emotionally, to develop. The vital part is learning to move that awareness from self-censure to self-examination. Rather than asking, "What is defective in me?" ask, "What am I experiencing internally at this moment?" That minor shift transforms disgrace into inquiry, and inquiry is the antithesis of fear. Let's discuss the science briefly. In individuals with social anxiety, studies show heightened activity not only in the amygdala, fear hub, but also the medial prefrontal cortex, the part for self-focused thought. This indicates your brain physically positions you as the focus of all social dynamics. It's akin to being trapped in a spotlight's beam when no one is watching. Therapeutic methods such as mindfulness and acceptance-based strategies assist by redirecting that beam, recalling that not all quiet implies critique, nor does every look imply dismissal. People are often just absorbed in their own minds, identical to you. Yet you cannot logically defeat anxiety. It isn't an issue of reasoning. It's a pattern in the nervous system. This is why recovery begins with the physical self. Measured breathing, grounding techniques, and gradual exposure. These all recondition your system to link social instances with security rather than threat. As the body settles, the mind does too. And as the mind stills, connection is achievable once more. However, advancement is not straightforward. You'll have days of easy conversation and days your voice shakes anew. Days you astonish yourself with bravery and days you withdraw from plans simply to recover. That is acceptable. Recovery is not the elimination of fear. It is the availability of choice. You might continue to sense the anxiety, but it ceases to be your decision maker. And another thing occurs on this path. Your empathy, which previously seemed a liability, transforms into your asset. Because having experienced invisibility, you won't allow others to feel overlooked. Having understood the burden of quiet, you'll hear things differently. And having felt the sting of exclusion, you will navigate life with a warmth that radiates like sunshine. That is what social anxiety conceals under its veneer. A heart that is overly concerned, and a soul that senses too profoundly. A subtle shift is occurring in psychology's comprehension of states like this. For many years, the emphasis was on mending the defect. Today, it's about revealing the strengths inside the hardship. That change is significant, because once you cease viewing yourself as damaged, you resume developing. Social anxiety is not a character defect. It's a consequence of a nervous system that overvalued security. It signifies your mind formerly concluded that invisibility was the sole path to survival. But you are not destined for perpetual obscurity. You are destined to flourish, however gradually, however silently. The journey frequently starts with minor acts of resistance, not profound alterations, but quiet mutinies against fear. Holding eye contact for just a moment more than typical. Talking even as your instincts scream for silence. Permitting a lull in dialogue without scrambling to occupy it. These instances don't appear courageous externally, but they are. They are evidence of prioritizing engagement above defense. And incrementally, these small triumphs reshape your mind. You start to regain self-trust. And as that confidence grows, anxiety's grip weakens. But there's an aspect rarely discussed. As the anxiety recedes, a void can also appear, because it shaped your identity for such a duration. What are you absent it? What occurs when quiet is no longer oppressive, but peaceful? That is the segment of recovery that feels lovely and peculiar. You begin to see the anxiety never obliterated your true self. It merely concealed you. And under all that uncertainty, you were consistently a person of value. Many presume social anxiety equates to misanthropy. Yet the reality is, you frequently care for people excessively. You envision their disapproval before it occurs. You bear the weight of their possible critiques before they are voiced. You inhabit their thoughts ahead of your own. That is the tragedy and the allure of a heart desiring acceptance so fiercely it overlooks its inherent worth. And that is the concluding stage in comprehending social anxiety. Recognizing that validation begins internally. The exact empathy you offer to others, the tolerance, the insight, the absolution, must at last be directed inward. For you are more than an assortment of uneasy moments. You are the silent resilience underlying each one. You are the individual who appears even with trembling hands. You are the person who continues to hope, continue to attempt, continue to long for inclusion. Someday, the anxiety will seem like a resonance, not a tempest. You will enter a space, and your physique won't tighten for a blow. You will talk, and the words will feel like your own. And when quiet occupies the void that follows, it will no longer feel oppressive. It will feel like calm. You will not require analysis of every movement, having grasped the most crucial reality, that you were never critiqued as severely as you critiqued yourself. And perhaps with that insight, you will at last experience something social anxiety previously took from you: comfort. The comfort of visibility without performance. The comfort of existing without justification. The comfort of knowing your value was never a thing to demonstrate, merely a thing to recollect. Thus, if you are hearing this currently, inhale. You have passed years in a struggle invisible to others, yet you remain, still attempting, still learning to articulate, even as your voice wavers. And that is the source of your remarkableness, because bravery is not invariably clamorous. Sometimes it is silent. Sometimes it's a murmur stating, "I will attempt this again tomorrow." And sometimes that murmur has the power to alter everything,